You don't notice it at first, but something shifts. Not outside, inside. The strange part is that it doesn't come with excitement or noise. It comes quietly, almost like a whisper behind your thoughts. Suddenly there's this subtle feeling like something is about to change. Not in a dramatic way, but in a way that feels inevitable. Carl Jung once suggested that the psyche begins preparing long before reality reflects it. And that's exactly what this is. The preparation phase most people ignore. At the same time, something else happens, something even more revealing. The anxiety you used to carry about the future starts fading. Not because you figured everything out, but because, deep down, you no longer feel the need to control every outcome. It's as if a part of you already knows. And that calm, it's not accidental. It's one of the clearest signals that your internal world is reorganizing itself to receive something new. What's dangerous is that most people dismiss this phase. They think nothing is happening because nothing external has changed yet. But Jung would argue the opposite, that reality always follows the psyche, never the other way around. So if something feels different within you, it's because something is already in motion. And here's where it gets even more unsettling. This calm is not comfort, it's transition. Then comes the part most people misinterpret, the discomfort. It doesn't look like growth. It feels like confusion, restlessness, sometimes even emotional instability. You start questioning things that never bothered you before. Your routines feel heavier. Conversations feel empty, and you can't quite explain why. This is where most people panic, because it feels like something is wrong. But according to Carl Jung, this is actually the psyche reorganizing itself. He described this as a confrontation with the unconscious. The moment when your inner world begins to surface truths that your conscious identity is no longer able to ignore. That unexplained emotional tension? It's not chaos, it's recalibration. You may feel lost, like you're between versions of yourself. The old patterns no longer fit, but the new version of you hasn't fully formed yet. And that in-between space is uncomfortable by nature, because it forces you to exist without certainty, without identity, without control. But here's the key insight most people miss. This discomfort only appears when something within you is evolving. Stagnation feels safe. Growth feels destabilizing. So if you've been feeling this quiet internal friction, this sense that something is off, even when everything seems fine on the outside, it's not a setback, it's a signal. And then, something even more noticeable begins to happen. Not abruptly, not dramatically, but undeniably. You start feeling distant from people, places, and conversations that once felt normal. It's not that anything external changed, it's that you did. Interactions begin to feel repetitive. Certain environments drain you in ways they never did before. Even relationships that used to feel comfortable now carry a subtle sense of misalignment. And this is where many people feel guilt, because they think they're becoming cold, distant, or disconnected. But this isn't rejection, it's recognition. Carl Jung believed that as the psyche evolves, it naturally withdraws from what no longer reflects its current state. Not out of superiority, but out of incompatibility. You're no longer resonating with the same frequency, and that creates distance. This is the fourth signal, the loss of identification with old patterns and relationships. You may notice yourself wanting more solitude, not because you dislike people, but because your inner world has become louder than external noise. Small talk feels exhausting. Superficial connections feel empty. And for the first time, you begin to value depth over familiarity. But here's the part most people misunderstand. This phase is not about losing people. It's about losing versions of yourself that were tied to them. And once that process begins, there's no going back to who you were. At some point, reality starts behaving differently. Not in a way you can easily explain, but in a way you can definitely feel. Patterns begin to repeat. Certain situations echo themselves. You think of something, and suddenly it appears. You feel something, and then it happens. This is where most people say it's coincidence. But Carl Jung called this something else entirely: synchronicity. Meaningful coincidences that are not random, but expressions of alignment between your inner world and external reality. And when this starts happening more frequently, it becomes the fifth signal. Your intuition sharpens. You begin to know things without logical explanation. Decisions feel less forced, more guided. Dreams become more vivid, sometimes symbolic, sometimes strangely precise. It's as if your unconscious is no longer whispering, it's communicating directly. But here's the part most people overlook. These signs only intensify when you're no longer resisting your internal transformation. When you stop forcing outcomes, when you stop chasing, something shifts. Reality begins to respond instead of resist. It's subtle, almost invisible to those who aren't paying attention. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because what you're experiencing is not luck, it's alignment. And then, something happens that completely breaks the logic you've been living by. Nothing outside has fully changed yet, but inside, the search is over. There's no more urgency, no more silent desperation trying to control outcomes. The things you once wanted so intensely now feel neutral. Not because you gave up, but because somehow the emotional need behind them dissolved, and that creates a very specific sensation, one that's hard to describe but impossible to ignore. It feels like arrival before the destination. This is the sixth signal, and the most misunderstood of all. Carl Jung hinted at this when he explored the idea that the unconscious does not operate within linear time. When something becomes fully integrated within you, when your identity, your emotions, and your internal narrative align with a future reality, your psyche stops treating it as something to obtain and starts treating it as something that already is. That's why the craving disappears. Because craving only exists where there is distance. And now, there isn't. What replaces it is something far more subtle and far more powerful. Quiet certainty. Not the loud confidence that tries to convince others, but the silent knowing that doesn't need validation. And here's where everything truly shifts. Most people try to attract what they feel they lack. But at this stage, you're no longer operating from lack. You're operating from identity. And reality, more often than not, reorganizes itself around who you've become, not what you're asking for.
So if you've been feeling this calm detachment from outcomes, this strange sense that what you once desired already belongs to you, even before it appears, don't rush to question it, because this isn't illusion. It's the moment where the internal world stops chasing and starts reflecting. And what comes next is no longer something you force. It's something you allow.